I want to tell you a story. So I travel a lot, and I get to visit little girls all around North America. And I was getting ready to board an airplane, and you know the jetway, where you're sort of moving from the wherever that place is to the plane. I was on the jetway, and for whatever reason, the traffic was stopped there. There was something going on the plane, and we couldn't get on. And so you're kind of hanging out in this tube with a bunch of people you don't know. And you're sort of in the space, and the traffic wasn't moving. And it was kind of dark in there, except that there was this one light. There was the skylight at the top. And there was this light that was shining down on the ground below, on the floor below. And I watched this little 3-year-old girl. And she walked up to the light. It was this perfect square that came down. And she took her little hand and she placed it into the light, and then she pulled it back out. And then she took her elbow and she put it into the light, and then she pulled it back out. And you know, it was like awesome, like her hand didn't catch on fire, nothing major happened. She then like put her foot in there and she pulled it back out. And then it was just so delicious to watch this child like immerse her whole body in the light and then come back out. And then get in there and kind of move around and come out. And I have to tell you that that is what it's felt like to be me. I've often felt like an outsider looking in, as if to suggest that there's this human experience, which is the light, and I'm somehow an alien visiting from some other planet who's just trying to figure it out, like the rules of gravity, like trying to figure out light. What are these different rules or games that we have to play to be human? And so around the age of 11, which is about the time it hits many of us, all the socialization and the rules that we've learned from the course of being little babies to then, we begin to slowly immerse ourselves almost entirely into the light, or into that space of the rules of being human. And I have to say that being a girl in the mid-70s in the South, and also being a tomboy, I wasn't playing by anybody's rules at that time. I seemed a little bit weird or out of place. And so I stepped into that space and began to conform. And I see this so often with many, many girls even now, where there is a suggested set of standards or ways that we should be. And back in the 70s for me, that meant you had to be sort of stupid. You had to be a certain size. You had to have blonde hair. I laugh because you'll know that when I'm fully evolved when I quit doing whatever it is that I do to my hair. And I'm not there yet. I don't even know what color my hair is. But I stepped in and became totally immersed into the rules of being human. And this really cool thing happened about the age when I was about 13 or 14. My mother, when she was 52, which is about my age, and she seemed so old, started to come back out. Like those 52 years or whatever of being completely immersed in the game of trying to be human and follow all the human rules and what it looked like and meant to be a girl, my mother, maybe it was menopause, started to come out. And I had the privilege of watching this woman do this. She began to meditate. That was weird. She would like go into these rooms and play Enya and just... She would journal. She would practice yoga. What? You mean you're gonna be still for like 30 minutes? And she also started running. And to give you a portrait of what my mother looked like, so I joke often, she was about 5'8", and her hair made her like 6'3". So she would leave the house at 4:30, 5 in the morning because she didn't want the neighbors to see her. We're not quite out of it yet. So she would leave in the morning. And this was in the 70s, you guys. And so she would go off with her little polyester collared darted shirt and those socks with the little balls on the back. and she would go run, and she would come back. And I can remember being myself at age 14, completely immersed in all the stuff about what it means to be a girl. And my mother would come back in, and I would watch her fixing breakfast, this like completely different species of our gender. She was totally happy, completely satisfied with who she was, and she'd be sweating profusely onto the kitchen floor. And I'd never seen anybody do that. Like, girls don't sweat. And so one morning she said, "Would you like to run with me?" And I was like, okay, yeah, that seems kind of weird, but yeah, let's go. And so this is when I was introduced to the world of the unseen. So I think about that little girl, you know, who was dancing in the light of the seen, like all the stuff that we can see and touch and feel, you know, that we can smell and hear and experience. But then there's this unseen. And when I would run with my mom in the morning, you know, we didn't have to say a word to one another. And it would just be this sort of space where I felt safe. And I began to tap into the power of the feminine, the unseen, the unspoken, the invisible, the space between the words. And so therein begins our journey into human nature, this sort of dance between that like incredible power that's within us and this incredible dance with human nature of trying to fit in, to conform, to be, to achieve, to compete, to be liked, to be loved, to please, all of those things. And this was a big competition I had both within myself and outside myself. And finally at age 32, I hit bottom. I had spent 32 years of my life completely immersed in trying to find the right guy. All of the things the checklist said would bring me happiness. And I hit bottom, and I called my sister Emily. And I said, I have two choices. I'm either going to move to California, which was like the geographic cure. You know, that's where the really weird people lived. There's a lot of unseen in California. I'll head over there. Or I'm going to kill myself. Which choice should I pick? And my sister Emily, who is still my spiritual muse and the most awesome sister in the universe, said, well, first of all, she said, don't move to California. It sucks, I've lived there. And then she said, Molly, just go to sleep and know that this too shall pass. And so the following day was July 7th, 1993. I headed off on a run. And without going into the lengthy details of what occurred, I will tell you that from the space of East Boulevard in Charlotte, North Carolina to Kenilworth, which was only several yards, I became incredibly conscious of the unseen. I had an experience where like all the words, the language, the gender, that I was no longer any of it. I wasn't a woman, I wasn't a divorced person, I wasn't a runner, I wasn't an alcoholic, I wasn't somebody struggling, I was nothing. And I became nothing, no thing. And I realized at that point that I'd been allowing 32 years of my life to allow other people to define the woman. Define the woman. And so I decided at that point that I would choose the parts of words and things and all of the things in the seen world and somehow integrate those into the unseen. And so 3 years later, I started an organization called Girls on the Run. And the idea was to give girls these tools that would allow them to integrate, like the stuff that we can't see, but we know exists because we feel it every day when we look into the eyes of our child or into the eyes of our lover. We know it exists. It's empathy, it's connection, it's understanding, it's compassion. And how can we integrate that into the full experience of being human, being physical, running, feeling the wind in your hair? And so the only way I know to sort of engage you in understanding that space and helping me share with like the world that this unseen is as real to me as the seen. There is no difference. Just because I can't touch it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I want to share with you a story about a little girl, and her name is Shakira. And I don't get the privilege to coach anymore because I'm traveling all over hanging out with the amazing women and men that help bring Girls on the Run to life. This was several years ago. I was coaching, and the very first day in Girls on the Run, we sit in a circle, and we all say our name and an adjective that describes us. I'm always like Magical Molly. If it were truth be known, it'd probably be like Maniacal Molly, but I don't say that. We go around the circle, and every little girl shares something. And there was this fabulous little peanut of a human being across the circle. And she just looked to the ground and said nothing. And one of the other girls goes, "Oh, that's just Shakira, she never talks." And I was like, "Girl, you just keep coming back. You just keep coming back." And I noticed on this particular day, this little girl stayed way off to the side. She was absolutely terrified to participate. So the assistant coach stayed with her. The following day, we come together, and she's moved a little closer to her circle of sisters, but she's still not participating. Third day, fourth day, she's now engaged, but she's not talking. So I went to the school counselor and I said, "Could you help me? I want to reach this child. What's going on?" And she shared with me that if you look closely about the calves and the thighs of this little girl, you'll see the scars from the cigarette burns. And this little girl had been left in closets for long periods of time. And so her eyes didn't work as well in the sunlight, so she had to wear glasses that would darken when she went outside. And she had something called selective mutism. That means that her vocal cords could work, but she had stopped talking. And I realized at that point that I didn't think I could do it, like I'm not capable. But then I know that the unseen works like that. The seen would tell us we're not capable, but the unseen tells us we are. And so over the course of those 12 weeks with that little girl, I began to see something happen. So while you might on her exterior see one thing, and while on the exterior you might not hear her voice, the unseen began to shine, and the light that was hers began to come out even more brightly. And at the very end, I gathered up those girls into a circle, and we got into this huge circle, and I said, "All right, ladies, let's say one word to describe our Girls on the Run experience, just one." My hope, of course, being that Shakira might find the courage after 12 weeks to share. The first girl said, "Awesome." One girl said, "Fun." I do remember, like the smallest of the bunch said supercalifragilisticexpialidocious because it is officially one word, just hyphenated. She didn't break the rules. And we got around to Shakira, who took in this huge deep breath. And she looked at every girl in the circle, and then she just exhaled. So the following day, we have our banquet, which is when we pull all these girls together and we give out awards. And the awards we give at Girls on the Run are the awards of the unseen. It's things like the Free Spirit Award or the Sweat Goddess Award. They're not your typical sort of, most achieved or whatever. I don't even know what those awards are. And so I had called each of her teammates up to receive their award. And Shakira's certificate, by coincidence, I don't know, was the last. I pulled her up. And up she marches. And I said, "Girl, I give you the Grand Communicator Award." Of course, her teammates thought I'd lost my mind, but so do lots of people. Because you communicate in ways that the world has forgotten. Like adults don't do it like that. You speak with your heart. You talk to me with a sparkle in your eye. And that little girl pulled out of her pocket a card. And she handed me the card, and I read the card. And I will tell you that if anybody were to ever say to me that the unseen is not as important as the seen, and I want you to know that you hear it every day. You hear it in politics. You hear it in corporate America. You hear it in how we parent. You hear it in how we educate. That the unseen doesn't matter. You can never, ever convince me of that. Because in the moment that I stood there with that little girl, everything, all of the things, everything went away. And what was left was completely unseen and as real as anything. And that little girl pulled out this card and handed it to me. And I read it. And I handed it back to her and I said, "Girl, will you read this to me?" No one had heard this child speak for months. And this little girl read that card out loud. And what she said was, "Dear Molly, the word I wanted to say yesterday at Girls on the Run was love. Your friend Shakira." I want you to stay in that space for just a minute. And I want it to be just uncomfortable enough. Because my belief is that what women bring is the power of the invisible, the unseen, the way we love, the way we hold our children, the way we birth something that was nothing into something that exists. Thank you for having me.